Habari za asubuhi. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of the Data Tamasha Africa, where we are building with data. Thank you for being with us for the past 2 days. My name is Philip Ayazika. I'll be your host today. It's going to Where are the Zanzibaris? Everyone here has traveled more than 500 kilometers. Please, questioned, asked, and built, and had comfortable and uncomfortable conversations. And I would want you to continue to sit with the theme of the year, which is building with data. What does it actually mean to build with data? Who are we building with? Who are we building for? And on whose terms are we building? We went ahead to hear from our keynote speaker, Ms. Nanjara Nyabola, who opened us up about the challenge of who gets to define African data. We watched what it means to be challenged. We've challenged each other, we've agreed, and we've also been able to push further into those conversations within the breakaway sessions that we've been having. In the room, we've had governance experts, regulators, civil society, and communities that are actually building with data and solving some of these challenges. And we would like to continue that conversation today. So what's different for today is that we're not going to get into any breakaway sessions. We're going to have an intimate conversation just right in this room until the end of the day. I also continue to remind you that our Afro-Feminist Data Museum is open. Please go and experience what it means to experience the texture of data, to experience that data has memory and data has a story even before it becomes. We'll also listen to David Mogera from Project Hello World. I don't know if it was agreed that the lightning talks will also only be delivered by Ugandans, but Karibu. And David will talk to us about from connectivity to community data. And then we'll also get into a collective reflection. We'd like to have a bit more conversations in this room, so we don't plan to step out of this room until the very end of the Data Tamasha, and we'll be closing at midday with lunch. And we'll also move into the Innovators Panel, which will be hosted by Valerie Waswa, who is a lawyer and also the curator of Data Tamasha Africa. We'll get to listen from the people that are actually embodying the theme of the year, which is building with data. We'll also move into a panel on feminist technology funding, presenting the sustain principles, and that will be led by Varaizo Magodo Matimba, and we'll have some of the partners that are working in the funding spaces join onto that panel. While that panel goes on, between 10 to 11, we'll have just 2 rooms open outside, and that is Cinnamon, where our design lead at Policy will be running a data visualization for impact drop-in studio on telling African stories with African data, Mr. Wilson Lukwago. And we'll also continue to have the Afro-Feminist Data Museum open for those that were able to join it yesterday for the closing. Please still go and interact with it. As part of the museum, still we have a games open playhouse where you're going to be able to play physical and digital games that are developed by Policy and partners. And then we'll also have the Tech Garden continue after the city and the panel. And that will bring us to the close of Data Tamasha Africa with the closing plenary that will happen between midday, and then we'll go for lunch. So welcome to day 3 of Data Tamasha. I right now want to open us up and invite Ms. Noelin Nasuna from the Defenders Protection Initiative that is going to be giving us a lightning talk on the human side of digital harm. They're going to explore digital well-being, burnout, and resilience in civic spaces. As an organization, we believe that rest is resistance, and that is exactly why we also did put in place a wellness hub. I hope, how many of us have been able to visit the wellness hub? So the wellness hub is on the first floor. Just look for Punza. Remind me the name, Punza Kwa. What's the name of the wellness hub? But it's on the first floor, right next to Cinnamon. Please go and check it out. If you need to take a call, you need to take a nap, please feel free to go and check out. So that's exactly what we are going to be talking about in this lightning talk, to situate the place of wellness as we do this work. As activists, as people that are working on human rights and data and digital rights, where is the place for wellness in this conversation? Karibu Noelin Nasuna.
Good morning, everyone. Noeli Nasuna Kabale from Defenders Protection Initiative, Uganda. It's an NGO that focuses on holistic security for human rights defenders, activists, journalists, women leaders. And our holistic security comes in the sense of physical security, digital security, and mental health and mental well-being. So just to kickstart us from today's discussion, so many of us are having sticky notes. Do we all have sticky notes? Yeah, on a sticky note, I just want you to write something small. What is your battery percentage today? Not your percentage of the phone, yeah? As a human being, how do you feel? What is your battery percentage? Is it 90? Is it 70? Do you feel you're 50% or you're 15% and you have you've actually added on the power saving mode for yourself, like you're about to black out? Yeah? Are we together? You have that down? I know some of us, we have been here for the whole week and we are operating at probably 10% and we have added on power saving mode just in case to survive for the remaining part of the day. And that's why we are here to discuss the digital side of, the human side of digital harm. And when you look at those percentages, it's now important for us to think, what is draining us? Could it be a WhatsApp message you received on your way to here? A WhatsApp message when you took the flight and someone is asking, you left this behind, how am I going to survive without you? Or it could be something. It could be an email you're dying to reply but the network is not favorable for you. A proposal you want to submit but the network is up and down. Or could it be the news you're seeing online from your country or around the world? Or could it be the back-to-back meetings? Oh. So when we look at your different percentages, we are trying to check on how you're operating physically because of the digital platforms that you are using. What is draining you? It could be the meetings. Some of us came here to attend Data Tamasha, but in between there, you have meetings on Zoom to also catch up with. Yeah? Now you've logged into the meeting, you're not there, but you're also here, and you're being drained by that. Or you feel like your aura is available and you need to respond to the things that you're not there. So throughout this whole week, we have been talking about data protection, data safety, data security, feminist data. But now today we want to look at the human being that's behind the screen. You that is using this platform, your mind also matters. And this is why we come up with the aspect of digital wellness. What does it actually mean to you, to us, and everyone that's using the digital platforms? When we talk about digital well-being, we believe that it's a healthy and intentional relationship with technology. What are you doing with the technology platforms? The work that you're doing on these digital platforms, do they support the work that you do? Do they support the relationships that you do online? How are you able to pause and rest on the digital platforms? Are you able to reach a point where you say, no, the internet is draining me. The internet is frustrating me. Every time I go, my algorithm is giving me death, war, fights. Are you in a WhatsApp group leading a World War III, fighting a war on your WhatsApp? So that is what digital well-being is, ensuring that you have a healthy, intentional relationship with technology without being drained, without depressed, without being anxious, and without harming yourself on the digital platforms. We have seen people using AI, people replacing AI with humanity. Someone is typing into AI, I'm having a relationship issue. How should I go about it? And bullying, sextortion, your images are out there, your location has been displayed, but sometimes it's not even what is happening. You're fine. Your account is fine, your password is fine, your device is fine. Everything in your digital life, the device is okay, but you, the human being, you are not fine. You are stressed, you are overwhelmed, you are fabbing. I don't know if you've heard about fabbing. Fabbing is a situation whereby you're having lunch, people are talking, but you're not hearing what they're saying. You're on your WhatsApp, you're on your phone, you're having a discussion, you're disconnected away from the reality. So you as an individual, you are not fine. So when we talk about digital wellness, it's protecting you, the person. Well, digital security focuses on the device, on the data that we are putting out, on the sensitive information onto these platforms. Digital wellness is protecting the human being that's actually behind the phone. I'll take you through a simple scenario of what a normal work day could look like, yeah? 5:30, you're finished work at 5:37 p.m. I am assuming 5 p.m. Let's assume everyone finishes work at 5. Just as you're walking out of your office, 5:37, you receive a WhatsApp message. Sorry to disturb you, but you're already disturbing me. Anyway, sorry to disturb you. You forgot to add this on the document. That's 5:37. You're on your way home. As you reach home, your workmate is texting. Have you seen this? Have you ever been able to see what the donor has sent? Are you able to add this information onto that document? That's 6:20. 7:45 p.m. You see, I could say, Defenders Protection Initiative has tagged you in an event that concluded 2 weeks ago. And your photo is there, so you go onto the platform to check. 9:10 p.m., it's late, and you're like, okay, let me just see what has been happening in the world. Let me try to catch up. Before you know it, 9:10, you're scrolling through TikTok videos. You're going from one account to another, and it's now 2 a.m. You need to wake up and get to work. So you left work, but your body remained logged into work. You did not have the time to rest. You did not have the time to think about what other people, you relate with your family, to engage something of the work. And this is because the digital device continued operating within you instead of logging out at the same time you logged out of work. And this is where we need to be careful, because it leads us now to the aspect of burnout. Burnout is not caused by one dramatic event. It's caused by several tiny digital interruptions that are accumulated over time. It could be another notification, it could be another message, another crisis, another video, another task that you have to do, another request that's very urgent. And if everything eventually becomes urgent for you, then you become an emergency yourself. All the time you're panicking, all the time you want to do this very fast, very fast. Imagine someone that is seated here. You have to post on your X, the same time you have to post on LinkedIn, the same time you have to edit a video that you're going to post, and the other time you have to inform your supervisor that, okay, DataFest is almost coming to an end. Then you have to network in an email looking for a partner here. So you're now having burnout, doing so many things at the very same time. And we believe that because even when we secure these digital platforms, we need to secure the mind and the human body that's actually using them. So we've been here for 3 days. And if you haven't picked anything, at least let's go with the 3 F's that you need to carry on while you're living Zanzibar. Yeah? How do you know that technology may be affecting your well-being? You need to take 3 things: focus, feelings, and functioning. When you talk about focus, you need to ask yourself, can I still concentrate even with a phone here? We are having this discussion. The people on WhatsApp, how is it beginning to affect your function? Is it affecting your sleep, your work, your relationships? your productivity, your decision making, your ability to rest or ability to enjoy things normally. Recently, I saw a meme on TikTok that was saying, involve me, and the friend was like, involve you who is always on your phone. So we need to see that the feelings, how does your digital life affect what you're doing? And finally, the functioning, how are you able to function with the digital platforms you're using? Are you still safe? Is it safe for you? Are you able to continue with your normal life and everything? So when we talk about, when digital habits start to affect our focus, our feelings, our functioning, then we know they are affecting our wellness as individuals. It's no longer about the safety of these platforms. It's about the safety of you, the individual that's actually using the platforms. The other one, life. Support, when we talk about digital safety, it's holistic safety and holistic security. So we need to think about the security of the mind. And the support is all about resilience. You need to speak to someone you trust or mental health professionals. Let's not look at the digital and the data that we put out there as just its safety, but also protect the people that are actually using it. We also need to understand who gets access to your attention. Does the app that you use deserve the right to interrupt you all the time? The notifications, some of us have notifications on for even apps that we do not use. Do these apps really need to interrupt you? We need to know what is urgency, which apps are urgent, which is a normal, and also let people get to know the boundaries. If something is not urgent, you can call me or you can send a message. You don't have to call me or call 1,000 times just so that I can pick up. When you make those boundaries, then people are able to understand that your digital wellness matters to you and they're able to respect that. Then we also need to protect the small moments. You could say, today over lunch, I won't be on my phone. I'll have discussions with the people I'm talking to. I won't be on my phone. When I go back home, I can say, dinner, no phones, just so that you can get to feel the nature and the humanity around you, like get to embrace the moment without being interrupted by your device. You could, some of us, first thing we wake up in the morning is to pick the phone. We could say, okay, I'll pick the phone after some 20 minutes or 30 minutes so that you're able to prepare your day before you actually get onto WhatsApp. You may open first thing WhatsApp, a message that distracts the whole day. So we need to be able to protect the small moments. And even before we sleep, we could decide to at least put a pause, and an hour before to sleep, 30 minutes, let me put down my phone and then prepare for the night so that you don't end up doom scrolling throughout the night. And then also the other is to recover after a hard day of work. We have had a whole week here. And you could say, okay, you need to debrief, take some breaks off, use peer support, just so that you are not on your phone doing, just keeping up and catching up. You can give yourselves the breaks that we need. And before you open the apps, before you open data, before you open anything online, you need to ask yourself, why are you opening this? What is the purpose? What information are you getting from this? Are you bored? Is it going to benefit you? That way we are going to prevent just opening things just without a purpose, and they are not beneficial for us. Or we are even going to create an algorithm that does not depress us, but actually helps us. So before we leave here, I'd like us to create a digital wellness wall. Most of us have sticky notes. So maybe we could do one digital boundary that you are going to protect, yeah? You could write just one digital boundary that you're going to protect as you live here. We will say that it could be no phone during dinner, no work, WhatsApp after hours, notifications off during focus, take breaks and traumatic content, something that we can, then after we can pin it on that, there is a flip chart there. And hopefully policy will be able to add it into our museum, that on the data Tamasha of 2026, we're able to create a digital a digital wellness wall, and people, this is what people promise to do themselves to improve their digital lifestyles and make themselves better. And lastly, I'd like to say that we cannot build resilience movements with exhausted people. Most of us are doing amazing work. We are helping human rights defenders, we are helping journalists, we are helping activists. But if you, the person, is not helped, you're not in the best state, then you're not going to be able to help those people. So we need to build, to do the impact, the work that we are doing, do great things, amazing things. If we work on ourselves, if we are in the best energy, the best spaces, and the best mental health to be able to give back to the people, that's when we can actually build resilience movements. And at Defenders Protection Initiative, we have created a digital wellness test. It helps, you can scan the QR code that, the test is all about your digital life. It helps you search, when you go to the QR code and you scan it, you'll take a test of how your digital wellness is, and then it will give you some information and advice and how to go about the digital mental well-being and what you should do to improve your digital life. We can scan that and we are able to have something to take back. And just, you can reach out to me in case you want to discuss something on digital wellness, I'll be around. And lastly, would like, Defenders Protection Initiative, would like to appreciate Policy and D-Lab for making this happen, and the Digital Democracy Innovation in Sub-Saharan Africa, DISA Fund, and Open Up for seeing that Defenders Protection is actually here to present this to you. Thank you so much.
No, I'm too tall. Thank you so much, Ms. Noel Nasuna from DPI. Let's give another round of applause. That's quite important work. I think it's important that once in a while we remind ourselves, just like we take care of our phones and the digital safety and digital well-being, that we also do take a mental check-in to just make sure that we, as the engines and the drivers, we're okay. So I want you to turn to your neighbor and really ask, how are you really? And ask them, how are you really today? I mean, by default, they are going to say, I'm fine. I mean, they all say, I'm good, I'm okay. But I want you to prompt and insist and ask them about their morning. Well, thank you. Clearly, like Noelin has said, there's going to always be a crisis. There's always going to be an emergency. Okay. I hope that we'll be able to pick up on the conversation on well-being. Clearly, there's need to have this conversation, and I'm glad that many of you have started that, that check-in. Please normalize that check-in, and just check in on how you are. So thank you so much, Noelin. I would beg us to move on to the next lightning talk. I would like to invite Mr. David Mugera from Project Hello World to talk to us about from connectivity to community data, Hello Hub data at the last mile. Karibu sana.
Good morning, everyone. Just as we wait for the slides, I wanted to kick off with some reflections for us. And through the session, we'll be seeing how do we capture data and how digital divide and education. And we set out a while back to, do we have the clicker? Oh. Okay, no worries. But I'll proceed. So we set up and we wanted to see how can we use yes. We set out and we wanted to understand what would be the bare minimum required to effect impact in the community using technology. And from that, we realized it was a combination of different components and not just one. So it's not just power or devices or connectivity or skills. The four components need to come together for us to start experiencing impact. So we came up with a solution called the Hello Hub, and it's a community-built digital infrastructure. It combines solar power, connectivity, devices, as well as skilling for the community. These spaces are built by the community and managed by the community. So it will be a public access space, and we consider this to be a digital asset. So community takes care of the construction itself. Our role is to train them in how to put the space together. And once community has put it together, the governance is also overseen by the community. And we've been working for over 10 years now. We focus on hard-to-reach areas where telcos have not seen profitability and decide either not to put towers or things like that. We operate in Uganda, Nigeria, Burundi, as well as Nepal. We've built over 135 hubs, as well as directly reached about 256 beneficiaries. Over the course of this period, we've noticed that community responds better when they are heavily involved in the process. So that we are not designing things and taking them to the community. And as such, we've been working on ways to see how can we translate this to data as well. So that community is part of this process. They understand what is being generated, where is it going, how is it being used, and also how can we use it. So, next, yes. In order for us to be able to weave this story of the data story for the community, you notice there is a lot of infrastructure we put in the community. There is data we are collecting from the infrastructure. So that is power, is the power on, is it off, how much power have we generated, how much has been consumed. We have things like network uptime, is connectivity on, how many users are connected to it, how long is it serving the people for. Then we have devices, are they online, which applications are people excited to use, how much time are they spending on those activities, and all this gives a wealth of data so that we know if applications are not working, do they need to be swapped out? Maybe community has used them for an extended time and they are no longer as exciting as they were when we started out. Then we also look at how are people using the spaces. Which services are people relying on? Are they using Wi-Fi mostly? Are they using charging, because there is community charging? We do extension of power to the host areas. So if it's a school, power will be extended to the classrooms. If it's a health center, it will be extended to the maternity ward. And all of this is just to understand how are people utilizing this infrastructure that we have put in their community. Then as well as experiences that people have when they come to the digital space. Are there any barriers? How is inclusion being handled? Do the women get time to come to the space? Are people with disability considered as we are designing these spaces? As well as safety, do people feel safe to come to these spaces? Are young girls feeling welcome to come when there is, a big group of all this data, and try to answer the question of what does community-centered data look like? If community is at the center, because a lot of times data about these communities is not the same as community data. And if there is any key area we want to focus on, it would be that. So connectivity lets us get access to a lot of this data, but for it to be community-centered, we need to answer 3 fundamental questions. Why is it being collected? Who can act and gives partners possibility to analyze and use it, whether this is a government agency or a development agency or even a school. And starting from the signal, the next thing is to understand, is this something that our boys can do? Is this something that we are picking from the field? Because a lot of that data is quantitative, but it's important to have qualitative data as well, to set the context, to redesign that. Did it work or not? What do we need to adjust to make it better? And for us, I think it's making sure there is that repetitively the way we are approaching the data, so that we arrive at a clear reason why some of these things shown in how they use digital tools as well as data, and how are they applying it across the board. So, and you're like, with this much, we should be able to achieve what we want. The second one is, what should we leave in the community? Many times there will be information that is helpful to the community in the immediate future, and there is no reason for it to end up in your database. So for you as the data practitioner, then it's very important that you see this. They can see this in real time, and we've seen that this builds. They can see this in real time, and we've seen that this builds up a lot of our own. They can see this in real time, and we've seen that this builds up a lot of our ownership within the community, because then they feel like ownership within the community, because then they feel like there is a purpose for us to collect. There is a purpose for us to collect this data. We can see it in real time. It's solving problems for us. Then the last and critical question. Is, as data practitioners, how do we, and if you want to connect, but that's my email as well. Feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. David. I think you leave us with very, very important questions. But you say that technical data can make communities more visible. Without actually necessarily making them better. Understood. Making them better. Understood. And I think that's something that we should all ponder on.
Data governance and what data governance is not really 100% clear. So what GLZ did, we have an e-learning course. An e-learning course on data governance. Yes, I know it's French, and ça c'est pour mes amis en français. Alors, je ne sais pas si vous êtes là. I don't know if the French colleagues are still there, but now this e-learning course is also in French and of course in English. Can you move on? Next slide. And we have four modules. Each takes maybe 25 minutes, so it's not a long time. And it's on the African data economy, it's on participatory approaches, it's on mechanism, and from data localization and cross-border data flows. So these are the 4 modules, and if you made them, you'll be very well prepared for any government job, I promise you. Maybe not so much, but at least it's the beginning. And then continue, next slide please. So you get practical and accessible learning on key data governance concepts, strengthening understanding, and the application. So it's really practice-oriented. There's, of course, theory and background that you need, but there's a very practical connotation, so it could be very useful. It helped me, because I'm also quite new in this area. And we have over 2,000
innovators panel, and we're going to be listening to African builders and founders whose work embodies the move from us as a continent being technology consumers to technology creators, and moving from data subject to stewards. So, Ms. Valerie Waswa, are you here? Oops, I don't think Ms. Valerie Waswa is here. So, yeah. In the meantime, I'll invite Professor. Yeah. In the meantime, I'll invite Professor Donnellerman from the Innovation Value Institute to join us on the stage. I'll also call Ms. Doreen Kaijage from the Launchpad Tanzania. And then I'll invite Ms. Gavaz Lushaju, who is a multidisciplinary and creative. And then Tapiwa Matsab. I'll also invite Mr. Puto Gerard Chikomeko, who is the curator of the Feminist Data Museum, to join us on the stage. Please excuse us as we check for the availability of the moderator for this panel. Allow me also invite Mr. Ibrahim from D-Lab to the stage. And while we wait for the moderator, I'll invite the panelists to introduce themselves. And if the moderator is not here by then, I'll take over power. We'll start with you, Mr. Chikomeko.
Morning, Chikomeko Gerard Puto, co-founder of Vodo Art Lab and Society, a movement of artists back home in Uganda. I'm an artist who questions spaces, materials, and other forms of spaces. Involve also the artificial forms. So I created the museum in the silo down there, and yeah, let me stop there right now.
Hello. Oh, that sounds a bit weird. My name is Gervas Lushaju. I am a multidisciplinary artist. That's just a fancy way of saying I just do a bunch of things and it's hard to call them one thing. But I work as a photographer, graphic design, doing video in film. I'm currently working with the Creative Writers Initiative called Asusa, and we're doing a project called Wahenga Wapya, which is, it's basically translates to the new ancestors, where we're creating a digital audio poetry library.
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Doreen Michael, and I work with the Launchpad Tanzania. It's an NGO that is based in Dar es Salaam that works at advancing human capital development. And our main mandate is to capacitate young people and women in the area of technology and digital skilling. Happy to be here.
Hello, my name is Brian Donnellan from Ireland in Europe. I work in the Innovation Value Institute. My
Mko salama? Mlala vipi? Thank you. For those who don't understand French, my name is Valerie Wasa. I will be the moderator for this panel. I am a tech lawyer, digital development specialist, and one of the curators of the Data Tamasha Africa 2026. I think it's very important for us to have these conversations and having these innovators in the room. And as you've seen there in the diverse spectrum of the innovation ecosystem, from poets to writers, to those who are in academia, to those who are in civic tech, and the technical techies, right? And what more timely a time it is for us to have this conversation, because for the longest time possible, the narrative has always been that Africa is just a continent where we are consumers of technology, but then we are changing that narrative and we are saying that we are creators and builders of technology. And it is even more important for us to say that what context guides how this technology and innovations are being built in terms of language, in terms of lived realities as expertise, in terms of our context as Africa. And so that is the context within which we are going to be having this conversation with our able panelists, as you have heard. So without further ado, I'm just gonna go through the first question. So I would like our panelists to tell us a bit about the innovation that they are doing or the role that they play in the innovation ecosystem. As you have seen, it's a big innovation ecosystem and there are different moving parts. So I guess we can start from there, coming this way.
So actually, as I said, I am part of D-Lab. I am making the AI-powered LMS platform. One thing I would like to let you guys know, most of you must know this by now, that when an AI gives you an answer, it is not necessarily correct. Huge surprise.
So we developed products, new products for the semiconductor industry in IT. My second role is in the Innovation Value Institute, where we help organizations become more innovative and to manage their innovative capacity. And my third role is in the Irish government policy-making unit, where we try to develop national policies to encourage innovation ecosystems and startup and venture capital companies be successful.
Thank you. So within my current role, I serve as the head of tech and SME for the Launchpad Tanzania. And primarily, I am currently leading a program called the SheTech Incubate and Accelerator Program, which supports young women to build and scale technological-driven businesses and solutions. So how I consider myself will be an enabler for young women, not only to be consumers of technology, but have part into designing and creating solutions to their problems in their communities. And primarily that would mean also to create a bridge between idea and ecosystem, but not only that, but ecosystem that allows ideas to thrive in Tanzania. And we work with women who have identified real life problems in their communities, and then we support them with mentorship, coaching, capacitating them with the technical skills, and help them to access the market, being the linkage, and support their business development. Just to end there for now.
The project that, maybe to just go take to the question about innovation, the project we're doing called Wahenga Wapya, which translates to the new ancestors or the new ancients, just it being that we currently now in 50, 100, 200 years will become what people look back on as the ancestors. And the project is a digital audio poetry library. And it arose from the fact that we have a very rich poetry culture in Tanzania, but it's primarily passed on through oral tradition. Specific performative poetry, there's the only way that someone else learns how to do it is from hearing it from someone else. And some of these traditions become lost when some of these people are no longer able to do these things or they don't have ways to archive what they're doing. So we specifically built it to preserve that. And it's been, I've actually used the opportunity to come here in Zanzibar to record some of the Zanzibar poets. There's a lot of things in poetry. It's also an interesting kind of data collection where there's qualitative aspects to it, cultural aspects to it that you're trying to preserve and carry on and get to people in places where they might not reach it, be able to reach that sort of thing. And that's sort of the innovation. It's to me, it seems like a simple idea. It's an archiving project. It's functioning as a website, but the innovation is more so to preserve something that has a certain quality that is meant to be carried on.
As an artist, I like collecting and archiving different materials which carries data and other form of knowledge. And on top of that, our memory and identity of different African cultures. Apparently, I have an exhibition called Ekitauruzi, which is a pavilion of reflection, which is related to Venice Biennale. It's hosting 2 shows on a monthly basis, where it's hosts exhibitions, where artists come, sit, discuss, and also reflect on their art practices, no matter the forms. Also on top of that, as the part of the curators of the Feminist Data Fest of this year, one of the things is the same thing I work with in my practice, which is looking at spaces in a different form, in a different way, and how they carry stories and the materials they hold, how can they be functional, how can create more functional in those spaces, how can they speak to people. Many of these spaces are silos, and I like working with communities. Basically, whenever I go to a space, I like picking people from that particular space or community, work with their knowledge, because I believe in local knowledge, I believe in local baba, I believe in the knowledge on the ground. Then I try to mix the two, the informal and then the formal sectors together. Thank you. Yes.
Wow.
Because they always have memory. And when I like everything I collect, everything I archive, when I come to a space, I keep asking, what was here? Like, how was it? Like, maybe the silo where the exhibition is, I had to ask what was here. And that's the knowledge I need. It was a playground for kids. How was it purposeful? How can I transform it into a new functional form? To me, that is knowledge. And as I said, like, even the carpenters I work with when I go to spaces, which need to be old, then at last is that the people who come into the space and create those questions and ideas around the space, how it came up into a functional space. Asante sana. Yeah.
I think I'll use 2 examples. One most recently from yesterday. So yesterday we went to, after this we went to the, I think it's called the Zanzibar Renaissance Literature Library. It's some, like maybe 20, 30 minutes away from here. And we met up with some local Zanzibari poets and we were doing some recordings. And it was 2 instances. One, there was a gentleman who, he just sat down in the chair and he's just like, can I start? He's like, yes. And then he did 3 pieces off the top of his head. And he got up, and then at some point someone asked him, like, why haven't you written? And he's just like, I can't look at that and read. Now I couldn't tell if he meant that it was dark or he couldn't, but for him, his repository of data is in his head. Like maybe he wrote them down at some point, or he made the pieces by reciting them until there are poets who just freestyle, and then he has 3 distinct pieces in his head. And there is a style in which he does them, and then we learned while we were there that there are various poetic styles of delivery in Zanzibar. And there's another lady who she's a writer, but she had a specific person designated to perform her pieces because she wanted them done in a particular tradition of performance. So when we set out to collect, like, let's have this collection of poetry, and when we were thinking about genres and categories and keywords that people can type to search the database, there's things that we haven't considered that we don't even have the terminology for. That there is styles of poetry where there are different melodies just within the Zanzibari subset, that there will be different ways that people deliver, and then different delivery people, different tools to deliver that data in this case. And it's been an added thing where it's impossible to sort of plan for, but like, oh, even if we're going to input it into search parameters so someone can find this, how would we describe it? So we have to sort of now get into maybe finding out what the Zanzibari poetic traditions are, finding ways they probably have names, and having that information and inputting it so that it's a layer on top of the data that helps an external party be able to process it. Yeah.
Well, to answer that question, I would not have one example, because in the context, in the work that I do, it will be a plethora of examples when it comes to that. But one thing is, the women that I work with, especially with the SheTech program, is the data we take to cultivate or to create these solutions come from their lived experiences. And I feel like when you talk about external teams, they can come with a lot of brilliant technical solutions or technologies to actually solve these problems, but what they would lack is the actual small details in answering the question is whether that solution can be adapted in the communities. And no one can have that type of data except the people who have lived within the communities and understand the problem, understand where the barriers are, understand what the challenge is, but also what would work or what has been done earlier that didn't work and to achieve that goal. So to answer that, I think I would put it that way on my term.
Thank you. I'd like to answer the question by asking a question. What is the difference between science and technology? Is there any difference between science and technology? I would think that there is. Science is universal, technology is local. So, in science, if you take Einstein's equation, E is equal to mc squared, it is true in Tanzania, it is true in Tokyo, it is true in London. But if you roll out a technology solution in those three places, is it exactly the same? I don't think so. So technological innovation is local. It's depending on local knowledge. Scientific innovation is universal. One project that I was involved in was designing airbags for cars. You know, when you crash, hopefully you never will crash, but if you do, you have an airbag in the car that saves you. We developed a product that was very successful for airbag development. We had developed local knowledge, local competence in Ireland, and the local infrastructure to do this. But we used that knowledge to take the idea of rapid response into the gaming industry. So we took some of the principles, some of the knowledge that we had in the airbag, and we applied it to consoles in the gaming industry, and we were twice as successful financially. So you can leverage local knowledge, local competencies to pivot, to move from one innovation to an adjacent innovation. You can leverage that local knowledge. But that local ability is depending on political factors, policy factors, economic factors, social factors, technological infrastructure locally. It's all local as the enabler.
Thank you, sir. So, actually, you kind of spoke of what I was going to speak about. But so as I was saying, so there was an implementation I recently did. So some person came up to me and was like, how many of you guys know about Odoo or EIP Next or some kind of EIP system? So he said he wanted to integrate it into his business. Now, when speaking to him, I asked him, how does your business work? So what he told me was mainly his whole business operation runs on WhatsApp. Like WhatsApp is his ERP. So I asked him, why do you want to go for a solution that would be mainly focused on emails or sending emails or receiving emails for your data ingestion? Why should we not implement your WhatsApp to be the primary source of truth? Because in Tanzania, actually, WhatsApp is the primary source of communication. I guarantee 99% of phones, if not 100% of phones here, actually have WhatsApp already installed on their phone because they use it as the primary source of communication, business, in every aspect. So what I think, like these other sources of software or EIP systems or other systems, they don't encapsulate in terms of Tanzanians, is that WhatsApp is not just for communication for us. It's everything we do in our daily lives. I think that is all I have to say about this topic.
Wow, amazing. So what I'm seeing is that using the mind as a repository, that science is universal and technology is local. And just something maybe you can think about is that if technology is indeed local and still we consume 90% of our technologies that are not built in Africa, then whose local context is being put in place? The other day, as I was using the Uber from my place to the airport at JKIA, the drivers, so you know the navigation when you're trying to find your location details and it's telling you, on Uhuru Highway, turn left. Everything was in Japanese. And I asked him, wait a minute, do you understand Japanese? And he said no. And I asked him, can you change the settings in the car so that it can be in Kiswahili or English so you can understand? And he says it's not that simple. So maybe this is something we should think about. If technology is local, then how can we localize these innovations that we are consuming and building? I would like us to move to the next question. And in this question, I would like to start with Professor Donella. And the question is around value. So the innovation value works on, so the innovation in itself works around the aspect of value. And so in this context, what does value mean for you and the work that you do?
Okay, thank you. I'll start with another question, if you don't mind. What is the difference between innovation and invention? What is the difference between innovation and invention? So, invention is about having an idea, having a unique idea. Innovation is about much more than that. It's about having the idea, capturing the idea in intellectual property, storing the idea safely in a cyber-secure location, deploying the idea to potential end users, realizing the benefits of the idea either socially or commercially, and then ultimately assessing the impact of the idea on society. So, what does value mean? Value is a complex, multi-discipline topic. It requires a lot more than just having good ideas. So when we look at value, we look at the whole life cycle of an idea, from ideation through to what we call benefits realization. What benefits were developed as a result of that idea? I've worked with companies who have lots of ideas, full of really intelligent people, super smart, but they were really bad at realizing benefits in those ideas. I've also worked with companies who were really good at operations, but they had no ideas, or very few ideas of their own. So the challenge that we face in our institute is getting the balance between having effective ideation processes, but making sure that the entire life cycle of an idea is governed well. And I guess, I don't want to be too dramatic, but I'd almost say that anybody can have a good idea, any of us or any organization. But what it really needs is that life cycle view to take the idea to the last mile where it is effective.
Thank you, Prof. You know, professors and lecturers like to query and ask questions, and it's good, these questions that you're asking. And, you know, again, something to take home, I think, is intellectual property and the fact that we all have ideas. I'm sure most of you, since you came here to Zanzibar, even this morning, you've had at least 5 business ideas, right? But then it's just an idea, unless now you create, you invent it, and also you put guardrails, as you say, things like intellectual property, to ensure that you actually extract commercial value and it makes money sense for us. So I will go to the next question and I will ask the remaining panelists, and we'll start this way, going that way. Yes, please.
I just wanted to add something about value, because especially, like, I work in the arts, in photography, and in the arts, the idea of values is a little bit unusual, because like there are people who would love to, like, let's say, make a living being poets. Like even the project we're doing, we recognize that there is something valuable in preserving the poetry, the culture, because like we understand the value, but it might not be immediately leverageable for anything at any given point. And there isn't a whole idea where in certain spaces, I'd say in Dar es Salaam, but this might translate to other spaces where people treat art as a luxury. For poetry, it sometimes gets treated as an intellectual luxury, where it's not approached in the same way, and someone might not be able to make a living, quote unquote, as a poet. We've been doing poetry events for a long time, and it took us time to get to a point where someone is willing to pay money to come in and listen to a poet, and we pay that poet to be on stage. So there's an idea that there's in tech, there's a lot of sometimes people moving to a place where, when can I leverage this thing to get someone to buy my company, someone to invest in it, even data, like people harvest that to sell it, and there's an idea of value that is based around like what value can I leverage this thing for, hence why is it valuable. But I feel like working in some of these spaces, sometimes you do arrive at something being valuable, but the value might not immediately or for a long time translate into any monetary benefit, and that makes it tricky, because you want the valuable thing to be able to find a way to sustain itself, but you have to find a way without it necessarily being something you can sell, maybe, in a way.
No, maybe we can move to the next question, unless you have something to add on value. Yes. So the question, I can just repeat it again. What is the biggest, actually I hadn't read it. Kunradi, what's the single biggest bottleneck, that is stopping African-led innovations from scaling within Africa, even before we think about scaling globally? But Africa has what now? Is it 55 countries? So that's already a very, very big market. But are we really trading innovation within Central, Eastern, Western, Southern, Sub-Saharan, and the northern part of Africa? Are we scaling? Are we trading these innovations? And if not, then what is the one? Just tell me one single biggest bottleneck that you have observed based off of the work that you do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, as me, I think as artists, the prototypes, the structures of certain products remain on paper. And okay, we're always looking for grants to support these ideas. Okay, for us as Vodo, what we try to do is that every project we do, 40% should go into the movement, so that we can support other forms of practices from different artists who are part of us. So I think because many artists have good ideas, but they're remaining on paper because they are looking for those right people to support their ideas. And you find that it's very hard to get a funder in just 1 year before you create a good reputation. So that's why we created a movement that, okay, start with us, and then we see how can we help you to improve. You feel like we can fund your idea, how can we fund your idea with the smallest money we have? Yes, please, yeah.
I think maybe the challenge I think of is the one that goes to, you know, science being universal and technology being local, is maybe the challenge in localization. Maybe it does arrive from, you know, technologies, sometimes a chunk of them or part of them coming in from external places, and then people trying to apply them locally. So for those of you know, like in Tanzania, mobile money is a really, really popular technology people use, and massive amount of transactions. It works for the space. Or something like a prepaid electric meter. Now, I don't know how common this is in other places of the world, but I've met someone who's just like, oh, how do you put in like money and then you get electricity, versus they just have a bill somewhere, and it just, so that solution was working for, like, there's technology and it's being made to work in the local space. And I feel like being able to constantly connect that, because you might have great ideas, and then do they work, or how to make them work in that space, because there's clearly maybe a problem you've seen. There's ways that people might not be able to financially engage with it in the same way that they would be able to do in another place. So how do you make it possible? So I think localization, I think there's a lot of people with every time I go to these things or I go to places and I meet people with great ideas, and it doesn't always, you know, there's an app that helps you get, there's one app that helps you get medicine, but their challenge is like, how do you make it easy? Because there's people who going and navigating the app and doing all those things, like there's a lot of things that you have to do to make sure that it just works in the local space, but the ideas are definitely great.
So maybe I could echo what Gervais was just sharing in terms of like Africa doesn't lack innovation or great ideas, but rather I would say the biggest bottleneck is actually whether we can get those solutions in the market in the first place, and at scale at that too. There's a lot of bureaucracy when it comes to innovators. And this is something that we cannot shy away from speaking of. We talk about an African market, but an innovator can still face very different regulation, very different payment system, very different languages, and even market structures from one country to another within Africa alone. And what systems are there to actually enable this innovator to actually take their solution to that market? We still are lacking that. And not only in Africa, maybe even in East Africa alone, there's still a gap. And I would say what we think, or what I think we need to do, is to actually rethink the whole ecosystem support. From the program that I'm running, I will tell you this honestly, oftentimes we support these innovators actually in a way that I would say is not as significant, or as, it will not drive our innovators to move quickly as how we want them to move. We give them support in terms of to develop prototypes. And then sometimes we call on competition and they win competition. We give them some, you know, seed funding. It's good, go out there. But it's not enough for them to actually leap into a market and be sustainable in it. It's not enough for them to actually tap into investment, and sometimes not even regional markets. So if I could put this in one sentence, or in one, well, long line, it will be entrepreneurs don't need more training. Innovators do not need more capacity building. We actually had hosted a stakeholders roundtable 2 months back at the Launchpad Tanzania, and we had called a couple partners in the ecosystem just to discuss where the gap is. And everyone said there's actually a breakage in the pipeline. So everybody's coming up with these amazing programs to capacitate innovators, to give them training, to give them technical support, but it's pretty much on repeat. It's the same program packaged in different company logo and company branding, but it's literally the same thing. And what you find is these innovators jump from one program to another, earning the same knowledge, going through the same procedures, getting the same type of funding, and they're not scaling. So what I think now is to actually capacitate or help these innovators access customers, procurement opportunities, investment that matches their stage, regulatory support, networks and opportunity to test the solution in real market, but not only in real local market, but also regional market. And it can only be done if we stop operating in silos and actually coming together to create this pipeline. That means stakeholder developing partners, the government, and even innovators themselves, to curate programs that they can move from one stage to another in a way that actually support their growth. So no, Africa doesn't have an innovation problem, but what we do have is a translation problem. Translating good ideas into sustainable businesses that can move across African market, and I think that's the biggest bottleneck.
So as I had said before also, that I'm a student at UDSM. The issue I think a lot of students are facing, even me particularly, is if you open my GitHub right now, there's like 50 repositories there. 49 of them are dead projects. So in tech, we have something called the project graveyard. While you decide one day, you have an idea, you go to start that idea, you work on it 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. After the 4th day, you decide, okay, this idea, I'll pause it for right now, I'll go work on another idea. I think the issue we are facing is that we are not going through with an idea up till a stage where it's an MVP, which is...
In thinking about, even the frameworks and the laws that are in place, like the African Continental Free Trade Area, the ESC, the customs rules, are they friendly enough to... Are they friendly enough to support innovation of hardware products and software products to move beyond our borders? And so there's a lot to think about, and maybe it's time that we start being honest with ourselves and saying it's enough for us to just keep coming to rooms, hackathons, nice t-shirts, as she said, and you're given some seed funding that can only do so much. But then if you're talking about scaling a product beyond your country to another region of Africa, you're talking about hundreds and thousands of US dollars and even millions. And so, something to just think about. Anyways, so much for that. I would like to open the floor for questions. I don't know, moderator, how many minutes do I have, Philip? 10 minutes, all right. So anyone with the burning questions, you can just shoot your hand up. Maybe we can take 2 or 3. Questions, reactions, comments? Oh yeah, maybe you can just stand and the mic is, yeah? Okay, so let's see the first hand. There's here and then there. All right, thank you.
Good morning. I wanted to agree on the issue of the innovation is there. People are innovating, and the issue is you keep incubating. I think there is a major, you're right, there's a major disconnect from innovation all the way to getting it out into the market. Now the question is, are we incubating rightly? I think that's the question that we need to address. Because most times, if you look, most of our countries are creating legislation that actually helps small and medium enterprises to actually thrive. The question comes to people together, it's easier to navigate the system as a whole. So I think we need to change the way we incubate in the silos in terms of the sectors as opposed to the industry as a whole, as a country. So I think that's where we also need to address. Thank you. Oh, my apologies. My name is Onentaba and I'm from Malawi, and surprising enough, I work as a judge.
Ah, okay.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for all the presentations there. It's a bit similar to her, but my question is in relation to government. What do you think the government could do to, if you're given an opportunity to speak to our governments, the greatest challenge and what could be done to really appreciate innovation? Because there's a lot of innovation, but I think Honorable Judge there just mentioned something, coordination. So I'd like to hear solutions from you because you've dealt with this issue. Thank you. My name is Swedi and I have an investment facilitation company here in Tanzania and Zanzibar.
Last question, can we take one?
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Emma Piri from Lusaka, Zambia. Yes, so my question is related to what Judge has just alluded to. Yes, we seem to have good pieces of legislation, policies and strategies, even back home where I'm coming from. But then I don't know, I would like to find out, maybe in East Africa, the pattern could be different. How is the enforcement of the same laws we're referring to? How are we implementing? Do we have people getting down to the ground to go and monitor to see how the implementation is being carried out? Because it's very, very important to see that people are doing the right thing. Remember, we are here so that we can build with data. Building with data is very, very important because it is the only way it can give us a proper direction from an informed point. So what is the position, my submission?
Should I? Okay.
I'll take one last question, and then that will be it. I promise this is the last.
Okay, thank you for the presentation, guys. My name is Farham Tingwa, I'm from Zimbabwe. So what I wanted to ask is, I think when it comes to innovation, one of the things you're having to convince people to take on some risk, right? Versus maybe there's things that have been done and proven to work in other places. How have you guys like navigated that? Where it's like, maybe this is like a novel approach, but let's do it regardless. Have you guys been able to get buy-in, and how in some cases? Thank you.
I said I'm going to do the government one, now the mic is on me. This is not nice. But yes, I think to answer the question on what the government needs to do is maybe to ride on what the judge had shared earlier is true. The only reason why these innovators, there's a breakage in pipeline is because people trust what has already worked perfectly. And I think that's where the government needs to start. The government needs to be comfortable with experimentation and understanding that innovation means some things will not work, you know, and it won't be perfect. But if every pilot has to look perfect from the day one or from the get-go, that means we are discouraging exactly the kind of experimentation that will lead to better solutions in our community. And that is where we need to start. That is the starting point. And this goes in hand in hand with making sure that we are creating opportunities for local innovators to test solutions within public systems. And sometimes even being granted the permission to interact with the public. Because if we're honest, sometimes this takes time. And I have been in this ecosystem as a learner for a long time. My first day at Tamasha was in grade 9. That was my first day at Tamasha. I was in grade 9. And that's when I started learning about innovation, about inventing and all of that. And one thing that has persevered through the years is the fact that innovators need data. Data is not accessible, especially getting data from public institution. It's quite difficult. Now, how do we expect solution if we do not work with innovators? You know, that is something that has always baffled me. And we need to improve procurement processes so that small and emerging businesses can compete, can survive, you know, creating predictable regulatory environments, but also making data more accessible because, hey, at the end of the day.
I'm just trying to think if there's something I could add from my European experience. So one of the things we've done in our country is the government has set up a national design thinking institute to improve. So we have design principles, design thinking principles that are developed in the country. So you have to remember that what's valuable, the currency among the policy-making community is completely different to what matters among the entrepreneurial community. Policymakers will be rewarded for being risk-averse. They will be rewarded for being conservative. They will be rewarded for not causing any major disruptions. Entrepreneurs are the opposite, right? You've got three guys in a garage with their dog developing a product. They're going to be fundamentally different in their attitude. So the first thing is to encourage creative thinking and creativity in government policy-making circles. The second thing is around decision-making that's evidence-based. So there's a lot of activity, of course, with AI these days. Everybody's obsessed with it. But what about quantum computing? What about the next wave of technology? So Microsoft are saying that quantum will be deployed in 3 years' time, 2029, 2030. What are we doing now? What is the government doing now to enable the ecosystem to be able to pivot to the next technology wave, right? So there's a foresight exercise required to anticipate those requirements. So, summarize my comments as well as yours. The encouragement of design thinking and creative thinking among the government policymakers, the use of evidence rather than anecdotal data, qualitative and quantitative data, and the importance of not just being consumed by the current big thing, whatever that might be, but thinking beyond the horizon and getting to a place where you're enabling your entrepreneurs to be able to pivot to that opportunity.
I would like to take his question that you said about risk and like how you succeeded in taking by. Honestly, I've not succeeded till now. That's what I would like to say. But then if you don't take the risk, how will you know? That is my question to you. Because if you don't even talk about your idea to someone, or you pitch it, if you don't pitch it to anyone, how will you know what would have happened? Don't leave it at an if. Actually present it and find the answers that will be, there will be at least one person in like, what is the population of Tanzania? I'm sorry, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I'm sure they'll be able to give you an answer which you appreciate. That's all I have to say about risk and like when you should take it and when you shouldn't.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Those are great questions that you've asked and great responses that we've had. So just to summarize the conversation that we've had this morning is that number one, science is universal and technology is local. Innovation versus invention. The role that the government plays, they should be more willing to experiment and to test innovations within public systems. Design thinking and the need to encourage creativity more. Policy making versus entrepreneurship, being risk averse and being risk friendly, and so being able to reduce that thin line. Decision making that is evidence based rather than anecdotal. Legislations and policies that support local innovation, implementation, enforcement, and finally, attitude change rather than constant incubation. Mabibi na Wabwana, thank you so much. This has been an amazing panel, and see you in the streets and the corridors of Hotel VAD. Thank you.
Amazing panel right there. Thank you so much, Valerie, and the panelists for such an enlightening conversation. I think a couple of things have come out. Science is global, universal, and technology is local. Innovators don't need more training. The pipeline is broken. They need more money. And I think that question, that ask is going to take us right into the next panel on feminist technology. Who funds feminist technology? And I'm going to invite the panelists, beginning with the moderator, Ms. Varaizo. I don't know if Varaizo is here. Please join us on the stage. We're going to be looking at the sustained principles for trust-based funding. I'm going to invite the panelists. Ms. Varaizo, who is the moderator, please come to the stage. Mr. Chris Maloney from Hewlett and Flora Foundation, please come to the stage. Ms. Nima Aya, the founder of Policy, come to the stage. And lastly, Ms. Janine Bodach from GIZ, please come to the stage. Christian from Asakani, please also join us to the stage. This panel is on feminist technology funding, presenting the sustained principles and exploring who is funding feminist technologies on the continent. Over to you, Varaizo.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I am honored to have you all in the room and join us today. My name is Varaizo Magodo Matimba, and I am the AI Africa lead at the Meltech Initiative. And today I am joined by Christian from Masakane, and Chris Maloney from the Hewlett Foundation, Nima Aya from Policy, and Janine from the GIZ. So we are going to start this panel with a grounding so that you know the background behind why we're seated here today. So the conversation really started when there was the announcement that broke the world when USAID funding was cut, and it made the realities that we had in the feminist technology sector, it made it more real. And in our conversations also, in being in different conferences, we were hearing around the frustrations that people were having with feministic funding. And can we all see the screen? Okay, perfect. And so because what was happening with grant cycles was not really matching the reality around access to money, I think there was also another study that was done by the Numun Fund around where is the money. They actually did a survey to see where is the money. And you'd find that the money that went towards gender as a whole and what went towards specific feminist technology, feminist initiatives, not even mentioning feminist technology initiatives in particular, wasn't really matching. We're only getting, I think, a fraction, put loosely, of that. And so we did a gathering in Bangkok during AWID, where we had a session to ask what people needed when it came to feminist tech funding and what they were facing as well. So this led to us writing a paper in collaboration, and also, and you see on the screen, we have these 10 principles that we have there. Those are a summary of really the insights that we gathered from feminist technology founders and some funders that we had conversations with. So essentially, those 10 are just around funding structural change, resourcing the global south on its own terms, building decolonial partnerships, and also being able to fund creative work and movement work at the core, as well as being able to demand ethical corporate engagement and centering algorithmic and data justice within this, as well as to fund the true cost of feminist work, because it also came from the conversations that it wasn't matching what feminist technology founders were receiving in Africa, for example, did not meet what a startup in Silicon Valley would get for maybe the same work. And then as well as thinking about funding in ecosystems and not being project-based funding, because we all know what we keep saying and what we keep talking about. We need flexible funding. And then also investing in memory and knowledge. We talk about underrepresentation consistently, and so it is important for us to be able to actually fund and invest memory and knowledge systems and indigenous knowledge systems that we have on the continent. And also, most importantly, that funding is not just success, but it also involves learning. So how can we build learning partnerships that are reciprocal and that benefit both the person that is, or the institution that is putting money onto the continent, and also the initiatives that are based on this continent? How do we create value both ways? So we have a model of what trust-based funding looks like in practice. And one of those things include being able to have multi-year flexible grants, and then also having community-led metrics where the people that are actually doing the work actually say, this is what success looks like for us. And it will be a co-creation process where they are able to actually work with the funders or with the donors to actually develop what those metrics look like. And also being able to center creative work as infrastructure. We do know that the work that we're building with, or even the users of AI and the consumers of AI, we do know that we've used as a huge group that is within there. And we need to take conversations that involve technology to make them more digestible and use simpler language and use ways that are engaging, and creativity poses as an avenue through which we can do that. As well as having a wider funding ecosystem. Actually, right now we have one dedicated funder for feminist tech, so that is the New Moon Fund. They are openly, they say they're a feminist tech funder openly. And so it would be good to have more funders that come out and say, we fund feminist technology exclusively. That would be the bigger goal. What are some of the ways that we're taking those sustained principles to practice? There's a podcast series that is being released and being led by Policy. Please check it out on your streaming platforms. The session that we have here, our hope is that after this, when we get feedback and we get questions from the room, I think Philip will be distributing notes in the room to take questions. So there'll be sticky notes distributed, so please write down your questions. And then in October, we envision that we're going to have a workshop and a working group that brings together founders of feminist technology and funders into the room. So that is all with talking about the background. I would like to now start our panel discussion, and it is important for us to know, to understand who is sitting in the room and the kind of work they do. So on the stage today, we do have a private institution that is a private philanthropic foundation, and they are what I think I'd like to do, independent in a way. And we do have also GIZ that is seated with us, and GIZ is a government-led funding agency, and they are accountable to the German government as well as to German taxpayers as well. And then we do have Masakane, which is a sub-grantor, and also Policy, now a sub-grantor as well. So would like to dive into it. My first question, I would like to start with you, Janine. Would you like to tell us how you fund feminist technology in your portfolio? Is it a standalone program that you have, or is it embedded in other program areas? And how do you decide how you fund this?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thanks for the invitation to be in this panel and to bringing my perspective as being part of the implementing agency of German Development Corporation. So as you rightly said, we're actually a government-owned institution, so we're funded by the German government and therefore commissioned by the German government. And we also receive co-funding from the European Union and also governmental institutions, embassies, and so on and so forth. So I'm bringing in the perspective for an implementing agency that is advising and organizing and helps deliver and design funding, and not as a funder in itself. So we do not have an overall dedicated feminist technology budget in itself, but funding feminist technology is basically folded into sector programs, and there are digital initiatives that are resourced on a case-by-case basis. That means when we do appraisal missions for projects, and we always do them with local communities, we actually spend quite a lot of time trying to get inputs, because one of the principles was design projects and programs together with communities and with the people you actually want to address. So we're doing that. And then we are, especially when it comes to funding regarding to feminist technology, we are part of, so Germany, as you maybe know, used to have a feminist foreign policy, and with this, they also implemented and started developing a feminist development policy. Now, the feminist foreign policy, well, but the feminist development policy is still in place, and when we design projects, so we adhere to what they call the 3 Rs, rights, resources, and representation of women and young girls. So when we design projects, we have to adhere to those principles, as well as we do gender analysis for all the projects that we develop, and that's basically how we decide what kind of funding we will put for the different groups. So if feminist tech is a lever for rights, resources, representation, solidarity, supporting the ecofeminist movement, and so on, then it's integrated in the budget of the respective program. And also we do this with, for example, having partnerships with organizations like Policy, who are then doing grant making as well to organizations. You have to give me signs when I have to stop talking, because I love talking about this topic. So,
thank you so much. I would like to go to you, Chris. Would you like to tell us about your program portfolio? Is it is feminist technology a dedicated pillar, or do you resource it on a case-by-case basis?
Great. Thanks, Vari. I think this is a great panel because it's highlighting that funders are not a monolith. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind as we think through some of these principles as well. I come historically from USAID and the MCC, which couldn't be more different than where I am now at the Hewlett Foundation. So the Hewlett Foundation, if you're not aware, is a California-based foundation. It's the family foundation of Bill Hewlett. So if you have an HP product, we are the family foundation of the HP. It is not the HP Foundation, which is also there to make things very confusing for everybody. So the program that I'm a part of is called Gender Equity and Governance. It has 4 very distinct components. The first is focused on reproductive equity, both in Africa and the United States. The second is on women's economic empowerment, and historically it was focused on gender disaggregated data, but now really it's much more around feminist-centric macroeconomic policymaking around Africa. Our third portfolio is called Inclusive Governance, which is strictly focused in Kenya, Ghana, Senegal, and Mexico, working with very, very local civil society on power asymmetries with their centers. So how that is manifested in those countries is quite distinct to each of those countries. And then the final portfolio, which is the one that I co-lead, is called Evidence-Informed Policymaking in East and West Africa. And the idea there is to work primarily with African-based and led organizations that are unlocking different parts of the data, evidence, and AI revolution for better policymaking. Wrapped around that is also a significant amount of work around data governance and AI governance, because we want to make sure that when data and evidence is being used, it's being used safely and responsibly. So I say that as a big chapeau because Femtech kind of cuts across all of that. So it's embedded in all of that. I think Hewlett is very unique in that we are very much field funders. And so as opposed to USAID or MCC or GIZ, where you're very sort of project oriented, I half jokingly say we're based on Sand Hill Road in California for a reason. And if you're not familiar with Sand Hill Road, that's where all of the big tech venture capital firms sit. And so my job is not to sit in California and think up projects completely removed from the reality here, but rather my job is to spend as much time on the continent as possible meeting with many, many different organizations who are broadly driving towards the change that we're trying to seek. And so therefore provide checks for core support or program support, which is a little less flexible than core support, and basically get out of the way. So it really is an ecosystem play. And so when we see Femtech products that are within our envelope, which is something I would like to come to in a second, That's great, but I'm not going to think of that in California. It has to sort of come and be part of the pitch, as it were, from a given organization that we might be supporting. As opposed to a lot of fellow funders, Hewlett is small. So my own portfolio is about $10 to $15 million a year, which may sound big, but it's actually pretty small, relatively speaking. And so we are constantly making trade-offs with sort of endless demands on those resources. And so therefore, often when it comes to questions around tech products, whether they're femtech or otherwise, those can be quite expensive and quite risky. And so if I'm working with a particular grantee, the question is, given what you are doing and what you want to optimize towards, is this how you want to use the resources? If it is, great, and we'll go through that. We'll really defer to the grantees on that. But it tends to be more the exception versus the rule, versus larger funders who may be able to provide more support or coordinate with other funders for bigger envelopes.
Thank you for that. I would like to now move our conversation up a notch to go to Nima. Policy has set on both sides of the coin. Firstly, as an organization that was looking for funding, and then now you're sub-granting. So what has it been like trying to raise money and still caring for a feminist technology organization?
Thank you for the question. So honestly, it's been very tough. So as you all might know, Policy is just 9 years old. We were founded in 2017. And it just came from a vision that I had. And it was very hard to prove who we are, who we were. So many challenges along the way. I mean, the first one is documentation. If you ever need funding, if you've ever applied for funding, you can imagine how much documents you have to submit. You have to submit audits. You really have to prove yourself, sometimes in ways that feel dehumanizing, in terms of like what some funders ask for you. Because on one hand, if you are not a funder, you understand that they have to do their due diligence. But when you are on the side of receiving money, sometimes it feels really disrespectful and distrustful. I remember the first grant that I ever got was $20,000. And this agency flew into Uganda maybe 3 to 4 times to come and audit us for $20,000. It was constantly this feeling that they just did not trust who we were. But at the same time, they did take a risk and fund an organization that was barely 1 year old. So now that I am older and wiser, I can see from both sides what was happening. But when I was young and hot-headed, it really drove me mad. I was like, how much money are they spending on tickets to fly from Nairobi to Kampala? 3 people each time, staying for a week, spending on hotels. You could just give me the money, like, trust me. I know what I'm doing. But that's how it was at the start, right? So it was dealing with a lot of those relationships where with funders, it's like, you are trying to give us money, but you don't trust us at the same time. Why is this not a trust-based relationship? And then we fell into, of course, project-based funding. For the first few years, we had to do all project-based funding. And when you request for funding to build your organization, as I said, we were so young, and I wanted funding to build our structures, like our financial structures, to allow us to have space to think about what kind of organization we were building, and there was no room for that. They would like hassle with you over overheads, they would reduce your staff costs, until it's like, how can I pay my staff if everything has to go to venues and air tickets? And so that's where I was finding my place where, how can we build strong feminist organizations when we don't want to fund the work that goes into the infrastructure of an organization? And yeah, that leads you to always being worried about keeping the lights on. You're always running from project to project. There's no space to breathe, to document, to see what you've done wrong, to pivot. You're always in that fight or flight mode. And then eventually, I think another thing that's interesting is that we've always been a feminist organization, and sometimes people approach us and say, doesn't that affect your funding? Doesn't that turn some funders away? And that's okay if it does turn some funders away, but we have to be true to who we are as an organization. And then somewhere along the way, we got lucky where we started to receive unrestricted funding, which is funding that and we can spend on anything we want. And we were able to spend that money on things like developing our HR systems, doing audits, like all the boring background work that requires you to have a successful organization. And I feel like now that we have that, there's just so much breathing room. I feel like we can actually be our best selves we can deliver the projects that we know are needed by our community, that it's not dictated by foreign countries who think that that is what we need. Because we are on the ground, we know what are the lived experiences, and that we want to create organizations that are based on care, but we also want to have that same care that we go to our communities with. And I really strongly believe that that can only be done with unrestricted funding, and that can only happen when you trust us fundamentally that we will use the money in the right way, in the way that we think is most important. So very grateful for this kind of funding.
Thank you.
And I would definitely like to, so these are definitely our funders here. And I've brought these funders here because of the support they've given us in a way that has allowed us to grow. So Chris, several years ago, we started to fund us and gave us this unrestricted funding, and it has been so instrumental in all that you see here today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Nima. I'm now going to come to you, Christian. Masakani is supporting the creation of African language datasets and tailored innovation or tailored gender responsive AI innovations to support women's economic livelihoods and low risk health. How are your sub-granting practices in the ECHO project, and maybe you can share briefly about what is the ECHO project? How is that ensuring the funding principles that we shared on the screen? How are we ensuring that those translate across the Masakani ecosystem and beyond, if at all?
Thank you for the question. ECHO stands for Enhancing Communication for Her Opportunities. So it's a program that focuses on gender-responsive AI and how language technologies can improve health and economic opportunities for women. We're supporting 4 use cases in diverse geographies. So we have programs, like we have a use case in Mali, a use case in Nigeria, one in Kenya also. And I think that one of the important things about the ECHO project is that it's not only a grant-making program, so it's also a learning program. We're supporting, so as said, so those use cases through grants and technical assistance to develop language AI solutions focused on women's health and economic opportunities. But at the same time, we're trying to understand what gender-responsive AI actually requires in practice and take those lessons beyond the individual projects. So that starts with how we selected the use cases. So the proposals were reviewed by a multidisciplinary SME bench, including expertise in gender and women empowerment, AI and NLP, responsible AI and ethics, and innovation. And we were not only assessing whether the technology was technically strong, but we were also looking at things like the potential impact on women, women's participation, community engagement, sustainability, and responsible AI. And that support also doesn't stop once the grant is awarded, as the SME bench continues to work with the organization during implementation. We're also working on the evaluation side because we want to go beyond measuring how many women a technology reaches. And we want to understand who is actually benefiting, who might still be excluded, and whether these technologies ultimately contribute to better health or livelihood outcomes. And then the final piece is taking those lessons beyond the ECHO project, because the intention is to translate what we're learning from these different use cases into evidence and practical guidance that can inform Masakani's other programs, but also hopefully be useful to innovators, funders, and other organizations building gender-responsive AI in Africa. So the 4 grants are important, but the bigger objective is really to use them to build knowledge that can influence how we and others approach gender-responsive AI going forward. And one example that I can give is the use case that we're supporting in Nigeria called Health Mom. And we are looking here at maternal health information in Hausa and Yoruba, including voice. And that forces us to think about gender together with language, literacy, accessibility, and digital access. So this lesson can potentially be relevant well beyond maternal health solution.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to come back to you, Janine, and ask, as an institution that is accountable to taxpayers and the government, what would make it difficult to apply some of the funding principles that we shared on stage within your grant portfolio?
Okay, yeah, I love those questions. Can you repeat the question? Sorry, I was...
So what would make some of the principles that we shared on stage, what would make it difficult to apply some of those funding principles within your grant portfolio?
So basically what makes it difficult is, number one, we are bound to project funding. So we're commissioned for projects and they have a duration. And even though, as much as I agree, we need long-term and flexible funding, we still also, we are, as you said, accountable to the German government. And that is where also the trust question comes in, that I completely understand that feeling of the questions that we have to ask regarding advocacy feels like as if we're not trusting, but we get the same questions as an institution, and we also have to answer them. And the project that I'm working in right now, when I looked at the principle, I was like, wow, that is actually everything that the project I come from, which is called SEED, Society, Equality, Africa, the Transformation, supporting Afro-feminist civil society organizations, is trying to do. And I can say from a personal viewpoint, since I joined this project in February 2025, we're trying everything we can to make those principles work, and we're trying to also kind of set a case that, you know, we as an organization are able to implement those principles, but it has been sometimes quite challenging because we are funded by the German government, but also because sometimes I wish we would had conversations with different people in the room. I spoke about this with Nima yesterday. I wish I would be able to have a meeting with policy representatives, maybe me as the advisor responsible for this partner, but maybe also my finance colleagues from sitting in Germany in the room, and we have this discussion together and also have a joint understanding on how we do this together. That is rarely possible because everybody is busy and so on and so forth, but yeah. So this is what makes it difficult for us. The way we have designed our budget, the way we also are commissioned as a project. Nonetheless, I think there's room for opportunities. And I think in a good conversation together with partners, we would be able to also access those rooms for opportunity or windows for opportunity. But it needs to be a joint learning. Like we need to teach each other. I keep on repeating that when I sit on those panels. We need to learn together, and that means we also need to learn from the feminist ecosystem, from the partners we work with. What do you need from us? And let's try to negotiate about this. Like, what can we do within our institutional frameworks? But there needs to be an understanding. And if then things happen that, for example, I just give an example that things are changed in the budget without communicating to us, and then my finance department comes to me and says, why does that not match? Well, that puts me also a little bit in a tricky position, which we can all clarify. And usually then when I ask, there's a very good reason for that. But that if I would have had that reason before, I would be able to have communicated it before. So at the end of the day, it's about talking to each other within our institutional roles, but also on a partnership level. And that also means, and I know that this is tricky, and I know that we talk about power dynamics, but I know to also, put us into place and be like, as you just said, how does it feel for you? And I totally understand that. And, but just have this conversation. And yeah, that didn't really answer the question.
I think it actually did. I like how you centered your response around structures in a way, and that brings me back to you, Chris. And you're welcome to share the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to application. Has it been easy in your case to apply some of these funding principles in your granting process? And what role does structural change actually play in moving towards full application of those principles?
Sure. So I was mulling on the paper last night and thinking about the principles, and I thought, why am I reacting in certain ways to these? And I thought to myself, let me step back for a second. If I was an organization seeking funding, what should that organization know about the world of funders? And I want to go back to what I said at the beginning, that funders are not monolithic. So when you look at a funder, I think you should be looking at 3 specific things. The first is what we've been talking about, is who are they accountable to? Because that's going to tell you a lot about their flexibility and their openness to these sorts of things. If they're accountable to a taxpayer, if the administration that taxpayer world is in is a feminist-centric one like Germany was, or Sweden was, there might be a lot of openness to that, right? In my country, we know what's going on now. So there's something around that piece of it, and but not just a feminist orientation, but also orientation for risk and return. Right, so it's just going to be very different in terms of appetite for foreign assistance in general, from the perspective of that bilateral, multilateral funder, which is very different than, say, a philanthropy, which is accountable to itself. In my case, I'm accountable to a board. If you're Mackenzie Scott, you're accountable to yourself, and so the degree of flexibility is profoundly different, right? But you need to understand those nuances, because that's going to tell you what you can reasonably expect. The second is also understanding for that funder, how tight is their world? And so what I mean by that is, every program officer is constantly inundated with lots and lots and lots and lots of ideas, and every idea is amazing. And I hate to say it, 90 to 95% of the time I have to say no, because I'm trying to optimize in a given year $10 million to $15 million. And if I'm really trying to give reasonable amounts of money to organizations to see reasonable amounts of change, that's just going to de facto limit the amount that I can give, especially if we're looking at long-term funding where I'm going to have to renew year after year. So just understand the tightness that your funder is seeing is if you're trying to get a sense of how likely is that you're going to get that funding, and therefore be able to do some of the things that the principles are expounding on. And then the third piece is, where does that funder sit in an ecosystem? Right now, the Hewlett Foundation, at least in evidence and data, I would argue, is one of the only funders left that is okay with field building and ecosystem plays. In other words, I'm agnostic about the country, so long as it's in Africa. I'm agnostic about the sector. I just want to see a healthy and thriving data and evidence ecosystem across the continent. FCDO was that way. Parts of Gates were that way. These were my main partners in crimes. They've completely changed their income and reduced malnutrition. Those were the 2 metrics we were always held to. That is a very specific measured thing of return. Much harder to measure when it comes to the creative arts, or how that might be valuable in terms of shifting narratives, et cetera. So when I see return, my board is okay with a sea of amazing stories. That's really what they want to see. And when we do evaluations, seeing broadly through surveys that the average person and the average policymaker that we're engaging with across the continent is seeing a better data and AI ecosystem for their needs, that is good enough. That would never fly when I was in a bilateral, right? So those are sort of the different things that I would say. At the end of the day, it's these buckets of categories that I think it's important to keep in mind when you're looking at the funding space.
Thank you so much. I would like to come back to you, Christian, and then we'll end with Nima. What are some of the tensions that you are seeing as an emerging sub-grantor in the space? What are you seeing in terms of resourcing or funding gender-responsive AI innovations in Africa? And what would you recommend be done differently?
Thank you for the question. So I think that we are seeing a few tensions, and I'm going to focus on 3 of them. The first is that sometimes we think about funding the technology without sufficiently resourcing everything that needs to happen around the technology. So if we expect an organization to build something that is generally gender responsive, they may need gender expertise, community engagement, responsible AI support, local language work, and strong evaluation. All of those things require time and resources as well. So that's one of the things that we're trying to address with the ECO project, where we're providing, so as we said, so not only grants, but also SME support, and also all the evaluation and learning part. The second tension is between accountability and flexibility. So as a funder, of course, so you need clear objectives, timelines, and accountability for how resources are used. But when you're building emerging technology in very diverse African context, you also need some spaces to learn and adapt. And you might discover during implementation that women face barriers around languages, literacy, accessibility, or trust that weren't fully understood at the proposal stage. And the third tension is access to funding itself. So the organizations doing interestingly work locally aren't necessarily the ones that are already connected to international funding networks or have the strongest grant writing capacity. And so with ECHO, we actively looked for potential use cases and organizations rather than relying only on organizations finding us. And we've ended up with the projects, as I told you, so in Nigeria and Mali and also. So what I would like to see done differently, it will be first, so resource the full process around the technology, create enough flexibility for organizations to respond to what they're learning, and be more intentional about finding innovators beyond the usual funding networks.
Thank you so much for that. And I like how you talk about funding the whole process. And policy is now in a position where it's now distributing its first set of sub-grants. So Nima, my question to you would be, what are you applying practically from the principles?
We run into issues because again, as everyone, I think especially as Gia said, we have accountability we have to give to whoever gave us that money. And the issue with grassroots organizations, because of all the things I mentioned in the first question, is that they don't have good financial systems. And so there have been times where we have given small pockets of money and then they just cannot coordinate the funding, they can't get you the accountability it needs, and then you have this really long back and forth that you're just trying to get anything that you can give back to your funder to show that, you know, we did what we were going to do. And so what we are trying to do as an organization, one of our pillars of our strategic plan is that we want to strengthen policy as an organization. But when I think of that pillar, I think of it more broadly, that I would love to strengthen feminist organizations more broadly. And I think there is a lot of capacity building that's given, but I really don't see any on financial management. Because it sounds so boring, but that is the powerhouse of your team. Like at policy, the department with the most people is our finance team. You never see them, you don't know who they are, but they are what is keeping the organization going at all times. And I wish there was more literacy. This is not something that exists. And we've had to like haggle and say, this is just not a system. So if they could come down here and see what is our reality, I think it would make a big difference. Mari, I'm so sorry, what was the question?
The question was, how are you applying the funding principles practically?
Yes, okay, there was a tie-in. I said all that because I think one of the important things is funding the true cost of feminist work. And that is one of the costs, is just strengthening yourself as an organization. Of course, as an organization, we don't have that money to do it, but we are trying to still do that with organizations through trainings that we give them. We want to fund creative
to then have you been navigating shifts within the funding ecosystem as an institution? And do you have an example of navigating ecosystem changes with a grantee?
It's a great question. You sprung it on me. It's a great question. You sprung it on me this morning, so I was thinking about it. And I was reflecting on shifts as I would have experienced them at USAID versus how I experienced them at Hewlett. And it really comes down to when a shift happens, as a funder, what is your orientation? Do you say that shift is a shock? Or do you see that shift as an opportunity for learning and experimentation? And I want to be very clear, at Hewlett, I have the luxury of being able most of the time to see that as a learning or experimental moment where, because we're generally providing, for the most part, longer-term flexible funding to our grantees, many times when shifts happen, I don't even know about it. So we'll get a report at the end of the year being like, and this happened, and so now we're doing that. And so really, the way that I've been navigating it is really trying to be there for grantees, especially in this moment with the funding collapse. of helping navigate how can we best optimize some very tough choices that may have to happen. How can we work with others in different ways? So that's been a big piece of it. At Hewlett, together with 5 other foundations, and I'm happy to share the website for those who might be interested, we are supporting a very unique initiative called Civic Strength Partners, CSP. They are available to any social change organization around the entire world. They're very focused on the Global South. To help them navigate this funding crisis. So I don't like shorthanding it, but one of the things they started on was mergers and acquisitions, in a sense. So it's a very fragmented space. Is there a space where maybe that is an option? But in most of the cases, it's actually been providing psychosocial support to CEOs that are having to deal with all sorts of things alone. It's building cohorts of senior leaders to help navigate this moment together. It's exploring what strategic partnerships could be in different ways that are not quite as extreme as mergers and acquisitions, but things that could be in the middle, just again, helping to get creative in this moment. So that's the type of thing that I feel like philanthropy is uniquely positioned to support. You know, a very recent example is from the feminist space. Many of you might be familiar with Open Data Watch, who produces the annual inventory of ranking every country in the world on their openness to data, and then Data 2X, which was one of the leading organizations on gender data disaggregation. Data 2X really got hit hard in the funding crisis that happened, and they have worked with CSP and to now merge with Open Data Watch. I would argue that we now have an organization where the sum is kind of hopefully going to be greater than its parts because they did it so intentionally, thinking very carefully about the range of projects, thinking very carefully about the people, being very careful in thinking through what does wind down look like responsibly, how do we manage psychosocial well-being, all of the principles I think that you see here, where it's very interesting when you think about it, how they were applied in the case of this merger. So again, very long way of saying that when shocks happens, as a funder, if you're funding in a way that's allowing for things to happen, because guess what, stuff happens, it's going to be less of a shock. If you're funding in a rigid project-based sense and you have not designed that project to account for shocks, then you're going to be in trouble.
Thank you so much for that. And my last question to you, Janine, would be, you spoke about having, for example, finance people in the room. What are other recommendations that you have on how to do things differently when funding feminist technology initiatives?
I just wanted to mention one more thing related to the principles, that what we're trying to do at the moment is that we are trying to distribute funding, we don't distribute funding, but we're going to have a call for proposals, and the decision about the grants is going to be made by a grant-making committee that consists of our 12 civil society partner organizations, and then there will be very small grants to institutions to strengthen their institutional and financial resilience, and those grants are going to be, we call them local contribution, and they do what you mentioned, Nima. So they look at organizations that are not financially and administratively where they need to be to get a finance agreement, like, for example, Policy Gut, but they will basically have conditions for the funding to improve their financial and institutional resilience, and there will be the capacity development or building that is, or enhancement, I'd like to say, because the capacities are there, is also going to provide it through that grant. So we're trying to also adhere to those principles to get organizations to where they maybe want to be or need to be to also access other sources of funding, but also trying to be more donor independent and try to come up with innovative and resilient ways of sustainable funding and resource mobilization. That just as a remark. Sorry, and what was the other question?
So my question was, what are some of the recommendations that you have around doing things differently when funding feminist technology initiatives?
Okay, so if I would have a wish list, it would be definitely to offer multi-year funding, more flexible funding, more trust-based funding. Also try to work with staged milestones that enable learning. So basically what you just mentioned is what I would also want to envisage, like give the chance to learn, like trial and error, but also make space for that. Give space for piloting, give space for innovation. Like which innovation has worked out in the first place? I think there's very few. So we need that space for learning, and we need that space to take risks. That is something that I would love to see. Back local feminist organizations and their infrastructure, seed funding, ground funding, funding, you know, enable them to run the organizations on the one hand, but on the other hand also fund things like solidarity, healing, space for recovery. For example, a great example in my point of view is the Feminist Healing Farm by Urgent Action Fund Africa that they've established, which we will also support the setting up of that thing. You can look it up. It's because healing and recovering is a very important part that, as you said, sometimes it's difficult to fund. Yeah, offer catalytic funding, of course, you know, get things to start. And ideally, but that is very tricky, and we had that a couple of times, really resource the full technology cycle. But I don't know, that is a big question mark. That is like very nice to have, but I don't know where all this funding comes from. And you know, me also, I just want to say that again, talking from a perspective, because I feel sometimes I'm also a bit overcritical towards maybe the German government and also GIZ. And I know this is recorded, so I hope I will be fine. But you know, Germany is still spending a lot of money in funding, especially feminist organizations. I think we want
vision that is profoundly questions directed towards both Chris and Janine. What bargaining power do organizations have when it comes to unrestricted funding?
Okay. What bargaining power? Well, I always would say there's some of the points that we said earlier, like understand also the restrictions the person that you want to be funded by has. To really try to put yourself also in their shoes, and then the organization needs to put in your shoes. So communicate, negotiate, but also convince, you know, explain why you would need this unrestricted funding and convince the other party. I know this is already, you know, I mean, but that's part of negotiation. If you give me arguments or argumentation to convince somebody else for unrestricted funding, I'm going to take this in my institutional role to somebody else. And I think there are certain areas of, for example, if you, within budgets, you know, there is a certain flexibility and there is a certain negotiation power that organizations definitely do have. Because, I mean, on the other hand, I can also not implement my project. I cannot do my jobs without you. So if you say, not doing this, it's not my condition, then we also have to renegotiate and to talk about it. So that would be my answer for now, without being very specific.
Thank you. Over to you, Chris.
I'm just going to be honest. The funding world is very power asymmetric, right? And it's just what it is. And I think we can try things, and I think it's super interesting what you guys are doing by bringing a council of CSOs to make these decisions, but that's still going to be asymmetric, right? One of the things we're very worried about at Hewlett is, you know, we very intentionally shifted most of our funding from Global North organizations to Global South organizations. But we're rapidly realizing we may now actually be replicating Nairobi and the Mashamba, right? So like, are we now just replicating North-South dynamics within a given country? So there's just always going to be power issues that play in. And so I always say we just have to be super, super cognizant of who we are and where we are and what we're aiding and abetting, because nothing's going to be perfect. What I would say, though, is coming back to the specific question of core. Trust-based philanthropy, which I hope Hewlett is a stalwart on, really requires strong relationships, and relationships take time. And so I would say for most of my core funding, it was a multi-year process of getting to know organizations, seeing how they act in the ecosystem, understanding how they relate to other players. Often we would do a project first, or something smaller that's maybe 1 year, just to see how it goes. In Policy's case, remember we did the data governance hub thing first before we went to core. That's very common. It's very rare that we go straight to core unless it's an organization that just has such a sterling reputation in the field, and many of my fellow funders are funding it. That just makes sense. But it's a journey, right? These are relationships, and relationships are two-way streets.
Thank you. The second question that I have, and I would direct it to both Christian and Nima, the question is, how do we ensure we're not influenced to change who we are and not just doing interventions just because we need funding? So Masakane sits at the point of receiving funding and distributing it, and then police is also receiving funding and distributing it. So the question is, how do we ensure we're not being influenced to change, I guess, organizational, individual missions to match donors?
Okay, thank you for the question. I think that we need to see what the condition of the partnerships are. So does the funder determines our agenda, or do we maintain our independence? So who owns and controls the work? Well, who benefits from it? And does the partnership strengthen African capacity and the broader ecosystem, in our case? So our mission at Masakane is fundamentally about African researcher and community being able to build and shape technologies for African languages. So maintaining agency is indeed very important. And I think that we should not stop questioning the power dynamic within the AI ecosystem, and we need to remain conscious of them and continue having those conversations.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Nima.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And for example, there have been times when we have been approached by funders to do projects, you know, that the kind of work that they want to run. And then when you look at the actual project, it's actually very dangerous. Like, to give you an example, it could be a project on, you know, at first it looks simple. It's like disinformation in Uganda. And then when you dig deeper, it's like, oh, you actually want me to do something that is sort of anti-government. I'm not going to touch that money. And it's a hard place to be, because you look at the budget, you're like, I have to pay 20 staff, and I'm saying no to this money. But you have to stick to your principles and who you are as an organization, like what is the kind of work that you do, and you have to protect both your values and your staff. And so there have been many times we have turned money away because it doesn't fit with our value. Either the funder doesn't fit with our values, or it endangers the organization. And it does sound a bit of a privilege to say no, because I have seen other CSOs who did not feel they were in a position to say no. And it's just tricky. It's really tricky. And I think organizations, I would never judge an organization who had to make that sacrifice, but it's one that, yeah, has to really be thought about carefully.
Thank you for that. I heard that we are at time. So in one quick sentence, if at next year's DTA, a funder in this room, if they have adopted one of the principles, what would be the easiest one to adopt? Okay, yeah. Yes, so that's the question for, maybe we start with Christian, and then we pass the mic going down. Okay, Christian still needs to read, so,
sure.
well, yeah.
As I said, one lesson should be funders are monoliths, so how I would answer this question would be very different depending on the funder. But I do think a lot of funders are waking up, whether they're practicing it is a different question, but I do think a lot of funders are waking up to this question around true costs. There is a raging debate in philanthropy right now on what is quote unquote appropriate overhead, how do we think about that, how do we make these trade-offs between core, program, and project, et cetera. I think there's a lot of traction on that, and so really getting creative, because we do have a fair amount of flex, I'd say, when no matter what type of funder we are, on how we think about the budgets with a given project. That's one area where I think we can start making some headway.
Thank you. Which one is the easiest? If a funder would adopt it by next year, which one would be the easiest?
I would think number 7, fund the true cost of feminine work.
We're all on the same page.
Okay. Yeah, because developing AI requires actually significant resources. So, yeah. And it's the easiest one.
Yes, I would also say number 7, fund the true cost of feminist work. Briefly want to touch upon Urgent Africa Fund. They're such a great partner to work with, because they force you to put a budget line item on capacity building. But it could be anything. It could be coaching, it could be mentoring, it could be the retreat, and it's baked into their budget, which shows that you can do it. Why are you limiting overheads? Why are you saying salaries are only 20% of the budget? And I think they're a good example of a funder doing things well.
Yeah, I would also say number 7, but I tended to also be on number 10, not just success, but learning. But to be very honest, can I also say what I think would be the hardest, but would be my favorite to achieve, would be number 3. I would love to sit here in 1 year and be able to say about my project, we managed to do number 3. Sometimes you need to dream big.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think our takeaway from this session is really finding the true cost of feminist work. Regarding how practical it is, we still have to see. And I think it was also key to know that, funders are not a monolith. It is important to know who the people you are approaching are situated, and also just to hear some lived experiences we have from people that are actually also distributing funding within the continent as well. On that note, I would like to thank my lovely panel for sitting and sharing those tidbits and insights, and I would like to thank everyone in the room as well. Thank you very much.
That's not enough hand clap for the panel. Very, very well done. And thank you so much, Vari, for leading this conversation. The sustained principles are published on the policy website for anyone that is interested in accessing those and immersing yourself in those. Please free to look for them out. We do have a podcast as well on who funds feminist technology that is out, a series of episodes interrogating the issue. Thank you so much. Quite a lot of things, investing in knowledge and memory. Speaking about investing in knowledge and memory, I want to remind us all that our museum is still open for those that were not able to interact with it yesterday. And we also do have an M&E form that was sent to your emails. Please take a minute to fill that up. But also the first level still does have the wellness hub for anyone that it's still a long day, whereas we are closing down. But if you still want to use that space, feel free to go up there. Now, as we wrap up, we're a little late, but as we wrap up, before our performers come to the stage, I'm going to invite Gavas Lushaju to give us a piece that will usher us into the closing of Data Tamasha 2026. I hope there's an announcement from Dr. Mahadia or Nima for where Data Tamasha next year is going to be. But let's see. Over to you, Gavas. Are you here? Karibu. As the performers set up.
Yeah, there's a slide there. Slide. I'll just do a demo of the stuff that we're working, which is some poetry. So I will just read to you 2 pieces. Yeah, the first one is about being internally displaced. The piece is called Mother Tongue. The slide will arrive when it arrives. Ever so often, my mother would call and she would say, Waitu, a greeting in my tribal tongue, and I will answer awkwardly in Swahili and say, Shikamo. It is the wrong answer, and I know it. But I am tired of feeling the guilt of having to know something that no one taught me, something that I am supposed to know, because I belong to a tribe and a place I rarely see. Perhaps my mother is making an attempt to preserve something, some tribal heritage, to have it carry over to her son, and perhaps she too is raging against the tide of change, that if she could just get this one thing across in some small way, she would have won. It is somewhat funny that my mother greets me in one language, raised me speaking another, and still I am more comfortable in the third that she does not speak. It is somewhat funny that when I go to my tribal home, I don't belong because I don't speak like they do. That sometimes people call me Zungu, because I speak a foreigner's language so often, and yet I have never been to that country, nor would I belong there. More or less funny, yes? That in all my homes, I do not feel completely at home. I am welcome, but cannot find my way fully in. More sad than funny, I guess. That there's another's identity living in my tongue, and I pay homage to them with every word formed and every song sung, that I sat in a class and learned in that language, the language of the books on my shelf, the language in which I think, the language in which I speak to myself. I want to say to my mother, I am too far gone in my ignorance, too fully formed in ways in which I had no say. My hands are full and I have no room left to hold on to my inheritance. This is about being internally displaced. Sometimes is just you're from one place, you grew up in another place, you learn another language, because of education and different things, you find yourself being a mixture of cultures. And sometimes when you go back to the places where you came from, you aren't able to be fully at home. I'll read one last piece, and this piece is a bit more fun and lighthearted. As poets, we say if you want to entertain the people, just read love poems. So that's what I'll do. It goes like this. I told her I loved her and she left me on red. I mean blood red. Veins bursting, Valentine's Day balloon popping, roadside rose shopping, eyes cried out, heaving, sobbing red. I told her I loved her and she said, this has been duly noted. Just to let me know that she takes what I feel into account. No heartbeats are skipped with me in the room or without, and I should know the answer is always no if I'm ever in doubt. I told her I loved her and she blocked me. Maybe I said it too late. Maybe it was an anchor that I threw out to keep her from leaving me, to delay my inevitable fate. A final morsel in the long trail of breadcrumbs that turned any hope she had for us into hate. I told her I loved her and she pulled away. She wanted a lover, not someone who loves her. I want someone to have and to hold, and she wants something else. Blankets and bodies to keep out the cold in a hidden heavy space where feelings are not involved. I told her I loved her for the 14th time in 2 weeks, and she called it a bomb. Designed to throw her off balance, an explosion of affectionate confessions offered persistently but gently to catch her off guard, vulnerable. I promised the love of the century, for should I be allowed even a crack in that door, I will gain full entry. I told her I loved her, and she said, try again. She told me I only think I do because I am a loner, and she's the only person I talk to. That I have never known being this close to a woman, and I need to learn that there can be true friendship without romance too. I told her I loved her in a text, and she replied, who's this? Little did I know I was already in her past, a bygone, a has-been, an ex. I shouldn't have sent it. I could go till forever without knowing that she no longer cares if I exist. I should have deleted her number and not tried to interrupt ignorance's bliss. I told her I loved her, and she sucked her teeth. She said, keep your love for your mother, that she is not the one, and I should try my trickery with another. She's cynical and suspicious of men. She has accepted so much cruelty, she no longer expects kindness from them. I told her I loved her, and she said, I love you too. Okay? Now try not to hurt yourself, you fool. Thank you. Wahenga Wape is our project. There are contacts there. Follow Poetry255. That's my email. Reach out, support. Thank you very much.
Viongozi wetu pongezi kwao. twatoa ujumbe wetu kujenga na data ni muhimu kwa mataifa yetu. Tutumie ni data safi kuondosha uhalifu. Kwanza wewe ni kijana kama kwa meza na kapani katika kunipigia kwa podcast session na mshande mbele kupanda kwa speaker mbele. Sema tena alokuja kwa baya Rabi Mungu lani Rabi kuje kunje kama sana kama ni Rabi popi mbwa tumbo tumbuke kwa ndani. Sema na dua ya malenga hairudi asilani. Mie niomba podwa zangu wenzangu mwiti. Kwanza leo na wasalimia mulio kwa uwajani. Tena wakubwa mulo nizidi na mloka viti nito wakiashika moni. Basi na wadogo kama sisi tuuliza hali gani. Basi sema na wadogo kama sisi tuuliza hali gani. Basi tuswe na si wasi Mungu atatulinda tuzidi kwenda usoni. Tutumie ni data za kuondosha uhalifu. Asema mama we kwa taifa letu. Kwa mataifa yetu tutumie ni data safi kuondosha uhalifu. Asema Rabi kwa mapenzi yake katumba wanadamu. Tena Rabi kwa mapenzi yake akatutukuza na kutupa ufahamu. Kwanza kuweza kujua jambo lipi jema na jambo lipi haramu. Asema leo tumeletewa data safi tena hili tulifahamu. Tena data hii ya kisasa tuitumie maisha yawe matamu. Kwanza mie ni wapongeze nchi 33 kwa kutuletea data safi. Kwanza mataifa mlokuwape hapa ni wapongeze kwa kutuletea data safi. Hakika mie nimefurahika kuwaona maana mloka kwenye biti hakika nyote wacheshi. Maana sisi wasanii hatujui tuseme vipi maana pongezi kwenu hazishi. Ila kwa wale Waswahili wenzangu nataka niseme kitu. Hapa najua naimba kibati nataka niwaambie sina kitu kwenye pochi. Ila kwa wale wanaongea Kiingereza for my pocket is empty. Asema kwa wanaongea Kiingereza my pocket is empty. Bati Waswahili na Waingereza wote muinuke for my pocket is empty. Baba Madiani simama uje hapa uwanjani. Vijana ngoma ya kibati sote tupo furahani. Ati muje hapa we. Haya muje hapa we. Sema muje hapa we. Haya muje hapa we. Sema leo ni leo. Leo ni leo. Tunasherekea data leo. Hongera mwanangu we. Na nyinyi mwaitikiaje we? Asema nimefurahika sana kwanza viongozi wangu kitini mumetulizana. Asema lengo la tamasha hili nataka niwaambie. Najua mumekuja hapa kupeana uzoefu pia kujadiliana. Asema najua lengo la kukutana hapa ni kupeana uzoefu pia kujadiliana. Ila mwenenu mie naimba kibati nikiondoka hapa roho mie itaniuma. Maana toka nianze kuimba. Hakika Waswahili wenzangu na wale wanaongea Kiingereza hakuna hata mmoja hapa aliyesima. Asema maana hakuna hata mmoja ndani ya nchi ya Uingereza aliyesima. Mama si mie sina la kusema kwa uwanjani naondoka mie hapa maneno hakuna si yetu. Asema hongera mwanangu we. Haya na mimi mwaitikia vipi? Asema hongera mwanangu we. Haya na mimi mwaitikiaje? Asema hongera mwana. Haya na mimi
Amazing, amazing. What a way to close Data Tamasha Africa 2026. A huge hand clap to our performers. Wow. This is it. we come to the end of Data Tamasha Africa 2026. It's a bit emotional, but I'm glad we made it this far. Thank you so much to everyone that has made this a reality, and thank you for your engagement. I want to invite Dr. Mahadia to just give us 5 words in 5 seconds, and then we'll take a group picture here. We've been struggling to find a group image, so anyone that wants to be a part of that will move to the front, and that will be the closing of it. All right? Over to you, Doctor.
Data Tamasha Africa. Indeed, we are building with data. So I've just been given 5 seconds. On behalf of the organizing team and on behalf of Policy, DLab, and on behalf of NEMA, would like to thank you all for engaging. Data Tamasha Africa would not have been without you. So a round of applause to you all. And we are looking forward to host Data Tamasha in the near future. So please look at the policy website, DLab website, for where the next Data Tamasha will be. But for today, Data Tamasha, not enough. Data Tamasha, thank you.
We will now take a picture at the front. For those that are interested, please step to the front so that we can take a commemoration picture for Data Tamasha Africa 2026.
Where are the men?